Joining me now is the Cobourg Cougars head coach and general manager, Wes Wolf. Wes, thanks for taking some time out of your busy schedule. I know you're preparing to get the hockey season started once again. So how excited are you and the players to get back on the ice on January 31st?
Well, first, thanks for having me, Mark. Definitely very excited to get back at things here after a 6-week break. I think, overwhelming sense of just excitement from the players and staff and everybody to have the opportunity to resume the season where we left off.
So Wes, let's talk about, I just want to talk about the announcement itself, with the fact that on early January, when Premier Ford did make the announcement, he specifically stated that unless you're in a high performance league or a high performance athlete participating for the Olympics, that you had to shut down. And then when the announcement was made by Premier Ford last week, there was no mention at all of if the leagues can resume. It was all about capacity limits. At any point, did you think that maybe you weren't going to get this season started back up again when you originally thought?
I think there was definitely some confusion, even, with minor hockey and all of the junior leagues. I talked to people in the industry on a daily basis, and I think there was an overwhelming sense of confusion at the initial announcement, just because there was no distinction made about the leagues that were put on pause and what that return would look like. Obviously, in the following days, there was some announcements made by the OHF, and it was made clear that the path was going to be there for us to come back, but it definitely wasn't immediate, the sense of coming back, that's for sure.
So Wes, let's talk a little bit about your roster, because I know that some teams around the OJHL lost some players because of uncertainty within the league if it was going to start back again in time. I know that seeing some tweets from Peter Goulet, they did lose a couple of players from their roster that asked to be moved because of the uncertainty of what was happening in the province of Ontario. And obviously the players were looking out for the best for themselves, as could be as expected. So did the Cobourg Cougars lose any players, or did anybody come to you as the general manager and say, hey, we're not sure if this is actually going to start back up again on time. I need to look at where I am moving in my professional career, or, for university. Did the Cougars lose any players?
We did. Our players were actually very fortunate, a few of them, to have the opportunity to play through the lockdown. We had 3 players on our roster who were signed with their OHL clubs: Ty York, Mason Vicari, and Duncan Schneider. Ty has been recalled by the Barrie Colts permanently, so he will no longer be with the Cougars for the rest of the season, but Mason and Duncan will both be back in Cobourg. And then during the pause, George Kratiris also went down to Boston to play in the NCDC. So he's actually currently going through a reinstatement process with Hockey Canada. An application has been put in. So he remains on our roster, and we're very hopeful that he'll be back on the team once the season resumes.
I know that during the time of the lockdown as well, Wes, was when the trade deadline occurred and the rosters had to be finalized. So were you hoping that if George does get down there, that there was some gray area that he'd be able to come back, seeing it is after the deadline?
Yeah, I think, the hope is that Hockey Canada shows some grace in the reinstatement process. I think the circumstances were extenuating, beyond anything that we've ever experienced before. And I think a lot of the players did go through that question of whether or not it made sense to go elsewhere to finish the season because of everything they've experienced here in the last 22 months. There certainly was no degree of certainty that we were going to come back. So I think, we're very hopeful that application is approved. I know that there are a number of players on other teams and in other leagues who've gone through the same thing. And, that question is up in the air right now. But, part of the process is the justification of what were the circumstances that led to it. And truthfully, I don't think there's any of those players who made that choice that would have done it in any other year. So now that the pathway has been cleared for us to come back, those players are going to return, and just hope that common sense prevails.
So Wes, let's talk about the direction the OJHL is going in and the emphasis on the 54 game schedule. We'll talk about what's going to happen in the playoffs in a bit, but why was it important for this league to play a full 54 game schedule, which, you know, has now extended the season into April?
Well, I think first and foremost, the opportunity for us to play 54 games relies a lot on the cooperation of a lot of different parties. And, you know, I know personally dealing with Krista Williams and her team at the town of Cobourg and the CCC have been absolutely tremendous in accommodating the requests. But there are also so many other things to consider between, you know, OJHL images and on ice officials and off ice officials and volunteers. It's really been a lot of work coordinating, you know, getting those games scheduled. In terms of it being important, I think, as I mentioned, you know, over the last 22 months, we've had a season cut short, an entire season canceled, and a 3-week pause. And so the OJHL is a development league. We want to provide our players with the opportunity to showcase themselves for higher levels of play, but also, you know, to get better. And I think, you know, we wanted to do everything we possibly could to fit in all of those games prior to the playoffs to make sure that we're fulfilling our obligation to the players to give them that chance to develop.
So you talk about playoffs, Wes, and let's talk about what the format is now going to be. Historically, it's always been about a 2-month run before the Dudley Hewitt Cup, usually 4 rounds of best of sevens to get to win the Buckling Cup championship. Obviously, that's going to change this week with this year with the extension of the season by a month, which means there's a month less playoff before the Dudley Hewitt that is in Red Lake this year in early May. So what is the playoff format this year going to be in the OJHL?
I believe that there are 2 or possibly 3 potential scenarios that are still on the table. It's my understanding that last Sunday, the league's board of governors got together to go over the proposed scenarios. There's an ongoing information gathering process right now, and I think it's going to be taken to official vote here in the next week or so at what time a decision will be made. So I think either way, we're going to be looking at some type of amendment to what the traditional playoff setting would look like. But I do know that we're committed to crowning a champion in our league and hopefully, you know, being able to send a representative to all of those following subsequent tournaments.
I think, Wes, what we should talk about now is the schedule for the Cobourg Cougars, and we should get the word out that in the original schedule that was made way back in August, you originally had a game scheduled for Monday, January 31st at home against the Trenton Golden Hawks. It should be noted that that game has now been postponed as what it looks like to when I visit the Cobourg Cougar schedule, that game is now postponed. Is that correct?
Yes, the game has been postponed. I think we felt very strongly that it would be reckless and dangerous, frankly, to play the game with players having not been on the ice for several weeks. To step right into game action probably wouldn't have been great for player safety. So we've postponed that one, and along with the other 12 or 13 games that were originally scheduled to be played in January, we've now moved them into February, March, and the first week of April. So it's going to be a very busy, grueling schedule. I think we play 13 games in the first 27 days of scheduled games. So rest and recovery is going to be definitely an important factor.
If I am correct by looking at the schedule, which I did before the interview, I think you play 4 games in the first 5 days once back. And we should note that your first official game is going to be Friday the 4th in Trenton, and your first official home game is going to be February 5th against North York at 3 o'clock.
Yes, that's correct. 4 games in 5 days definitely isn't an ideal way to start back up, but we do have a whole week to prepare. So hopefully, you know, I do know that over the course of the 3-week pause, our players all had a lot of opportunities to stay in shape. We met 3 times a week to do virtual workouts, but also a number of them have home gyms and some had access to outdoor rinks, things of that nature. So I think it won't take long to ramp up to it, but we are going to open up that Friday on the road and then Saturday back at home. So it's right into the fire.
So Wes, obviously with your schedule and you look at the OJHL schedule, some teams are starting earlier, but the way you have it laid out, the only game that you did have from the original schedule, if I do remember correctly, was the Monday, and then you didn't play again till the weekend once again. So how important is those 5 games, those 5 days or 4 days leading up to being able to get the guys back on the ice and assimilated and get them back into practice, in the game ready version? Because let's face it, as you and I know, we've been around the hockey. You could train at home as much as you want. You could try to simulate stuff on an outdoor rink, but it's just not the same as being in competitive hockey.
Yeah, without a doubt. I know that as a coaching staff, we've done everything we can to prepare for that 5-week or 5-day stretch, as you mentioned, leading up to the games. I think we have a pretty solid plan in terms of how we want to structure our week leading up to it. I know all of our players are returning back to Cobourg this week. We have some team building planned on Friday night, and then as you mentioned, starting Monday, it's kind of it's like a short training camp, really. I think that's kind of how we're approaching it. Is this is like a second season. There's 24 games for us to play from now to April, and everyone is starting with a clean slate. So we're trying to use those 5 days to prepare like a training camp and get the team ready in short order.
Wes, I know you're wearing multiple hats with head coach and GM, but also working with the town of Cobourg. Is there anything new that fans are going to need to know when they come to the rink on Saturday, the 4th or the 5th, for that first home game? Is there anything different than in place for safety measures as to what wasn't in place before Christmas?
I think it is slightly different, I guess, on the many hats, figuratively and literally. That's why I have them behind me here. But there is a limit on capacity. It's 500 fans. There are a number of things that the government has put in place. I believe that food or drink will not be permitted to be served. I think there's a whole list of what those regulations are on our website and the OJHL website for someone who's interested. But it is slightly different. I know we've had capacity limits as the year has gone on. We were fortunate at the CCC to have the snack bar open. I don't believe that's going to be open. And there are a few other regulations in terms of social distancing and things like that. But as always, we'll continue the vaccination passport checking at the door and doing everything we can to keep people safe.
Wes, I know before Christmas, the team was going to honor 3 longtime members of the Cobourg Cougars hockey team. That did get put off because of the fact that that last game in December was closed to fans, as the Cobourg Cougars made a measure to put in place for everybody's public safety. Where are we with that, or will we see that recognition of those 3 players this year?
I think there's been some discussion about what we'd like to do. The unfortunate part about that whole scenario is that people were making travel plans, the players being honored. Mac Lowry, for example, is still playing right now. And so the chance for him to be there while he was being honored was a pretty short window for his own Christmas break. So I think we will probably push that to a further season, as far as I know. But there are some upcoming events that we're going to be doing. Our cancer game is February 14th, which is a Monday. So there are a lot of special events planned. But for that particular ceremony, I think we're going to have to push it back another year.
Wes, anything you'd like to leave to the fans for the Cobourg Cougars?
I think all I'd like to say is we're very excited to be back and put an exciting product on the ice. I think the team is worked extremely hard leading up to Christmas to put themselves in a position to contend for a league championship. That's really what we're still aiming for. It's a very tight divisional race, but we're just really proud of the team and the opportunity to come back and play. And, for the fans' sake, I think this is also a really good thing that, it's a chance to get out to the CCC and watch these boys play again. I think it's something that we're all really excited about.